I would like to call on stage Nipun to introduce Mr. Manoj Kumar, founder, Social Alpha, and to take this discussion forward. Over to you, Nipun.
Good morning. And I'm delighted that you are here. I'm delighted that we've been hosting the Bharat Summit for the last few years, focused on, as Ram said, how can we help entrepreneurs bridge the gap and how can they build for and with Bharat. Problems for Bharat are clearly problems for India, but opportunities in Bharat are opportunities for the world. And as I bring Manoj up on stage, Manoj, why don't you come in here? There's no better way of describing him than to say that he is walking the talk when it comes to marrying passion and empathy with science and technology to solve developmental problems. And that's a conversation that I'm going to have with Manoj in terms of how do we use non-linear businesses, what are his experiences in supporting social entrepreneurship, and what is his advice for all of us in the audience in terms of how do we make the bridge to Bharat. Social Alpha, it works to identify, nurture, and support entrepreneurs through a network of innovation labs, venture accelerators, blended capital pools, and market access mechanisms. But before that, before he founded Social Alpha in 2016, Manoj has been an entrepreneur as well as an early stage venture investor. Manoj serves on the board of several companies, non-profits and research institutions. He's also a trustee of Tata Institute for Genetics and Society and a senior advisor to Tata Trust, and also a big supporter of the Agri-Eco Laboratory. Thank you. He focuses, and Social Alpha focuses on livelihood, health, and climate, but I want to really have the conversation with him on a broader footing. But it's wonderful to see how Social Alpha has evaluated 1,000 innovations, supported 200 startups, scaled several dozens of them, etc., some of which are sitting in this audience. But I think the best way to get started, and the lights are getting in the way, is to get a sense of how many of you are today building for Bharat. Let's get a sense of the audience. Okay, and how many of you want to build for Bharat? Okay, that's a larger number. That's about 40% of the audience. That's wonderful. So, Manoj, welcome, first of all, and thank you for your time. Thank you for, I know we'll be talking less than the time that you took to get here, right? But I guess the best way to start is with a success story. You have several of them. Would you mind sharing one of them with us, one or two of them with us?
Thanks for inviting me, and yeah, it took 2.5 hours to... Thanks for inviting me, and yes, it took 2.5 hours, and I was thinking that the next project should be personal air mobility or something where you can beat the traffic and reach places on time. But by the way, we have an aerospace accelerator where we work on UAVs and drones. So anyway, no, Nipun, thanks. It's been great, working with you, and thanks for inviting me here. See, when we started Social Alpha, the whole idea was to build the ecosystem that doesn't exist, right? If I can take an analogy from hardware industry, there was a time when you had only HP, Dell, IBM, Lenovo making the computers, and then suddenly everybody realized that it's actually a system integration issue, and once you have all the components available, anybody can integrate it, right? In mainstream world, in markets where investors, corporations, entrepreneurs, ecosystem, academic institutions, incubators, accelerators, everybody exists. They all do what is required from them. Investors invest, academicians do research and teach. And the ecosystem beautifully works because the orchestration has been happening since Industrial Revolution. So it works fine. But when you start going to areas where you see market failure, areas like healthcare, areas like agriculture, livelihoods, areas like climate change and emission reduction, ecosystem doesn't exist. So when you start working there, then you realize that you can't be an investor, you can't be an incubator, you can't be an R&D organization, you have to do each and everything right? It's like somebody who started the business of burger would have to bake the bun, get the patties, get the vegetable, get the sauce, and fully integrate and say this is the burger. But now I think they can procure each and every component and just integrate and say this is the burger, right? This is what happened. So our idea was to create the ecosystem for these areas where market failure is visible and startups cannot really build their solutions and take to market. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Let me give one from waste management and circular economy, and how this startup is starting from circular economy today is a deep science biomaterials startup. It's a small company. When it started, it was not even a company. It was a proprietorship concern in a city called Kanpur in UP. And the founder was collecting, and I think some of you would have guessed because it has now become a celebrity firm. They collected flowers from temples and upcycled these flowers into agarbattis and fragrances, and started selling, but nobody invested in them. And for about a year and a half, they were searching for capital. They could not find investors. So this company survived and built the business model on prize money and grants. So when you build for Bharat, remember, nobody is willing to write you large checks. So what you read in the newspapers every day and see in the television screen that now 105th company is becoming unicorn, you're not going to be one among them. Sorry, that capital is not available for you when you build for the Bharat. So you have to figure out how do you fund your growth, how do you find your early customers, and where do you find the cash. And this company beautifully participated in every startup pitch competition, whether it was for 5 lakh rupees or 50 lakh rupees, and won everything. Accidentally, I met them. I was part of the jury in IIM Calcutta entrepreneurship competition, and I said, can we talk after this? And I said, what stops you from building this business and scaling? He said, capital, and that was our first incubation. Starting in 2016, even today I'm on the board of the company. It's been 6 years. When we invested, they had 0 revenue. They formed the company. We took that early risk, but this company started as a D2C brand, became so popular and kept raising capital for growth. They have just announced a vegan leather, which is a leather replacement made out of a biotechnology process from the waste. And the next product in the pipeline at early TRL stage is a styrofoam replacement that is going to transform the packaging industry. So your carcinogenic thermocol can be replaced by a biodegradable packaging material. Now, in order to do this R&D for vegan leather, which is now actually being piloted with 2 high-street brands, and this biodegradable styrofoam replacement, you need R&D capital. Where does it come from? It comes from your internal cash accruals. So you build your revenue on your first product and deploy that in the next product, and then you start selling the next product and deploy in the next. So you have a series of innovations at different TRL stages, and you are taking them to market one after the other. But this year, we did Series A for the company. This is probably the first company in the history of this country where it's a social impact startup has raised mainstream capital from a mainstream investor, $8 million. So what I'm trying to say that when you start building for Bharat, the potential you have is large because you end up creating new markets. The markets which have not been explored or exploited by Tata, Reliance, Ambani, Adani, anybody. You are actually exploring that market. You don't have corporations in that market. You don't have startups in that market. You don't have VCs in that market. It's like you are adventure. Yeah? People like who used to people like Marco Polo and Magellan, right? Going around the world searching for new things. So you are an adventurer and you don't have that kind of capital that is available for mainstream. So you better learn to build your company on your cash accruals. Today, so first 4 years we had a problem of how do we find money and how not to spend. Today our discussion is about we have money in the bank account, how do we spend it and how do we spend it in the right way to increase leads and build the pipeline and build the business. So this is one example, right?
Go ahead.
Right? The second example is completely different. So you had a scientist who was working in a premier institution who had been working on MRI research for many, many years. Could not start his company because you needed much deeper support from the ecosystem, right? And this person is working on the intersection of superconductivity, imaging physics, and electrical engineering, building In India, first time an MRI machine, which is the, this is GE, Philips and Siemens territory. You don't get into that. And he left the job from a premier institute, safe job, and came to Bangalore. We started working, we incubated on our own balance sheet, right? We did, because the company didn't exist. And then at some point of time, we won some prize money, we hyped it up as a separate company. For 5 years, in the product development cycle, we could not raise money from any investor. We didn't get any term sheet. We were about to sell it off to a big player. 3 days before the term sheet end date, we got a corporate to invest. And we did, the first round was Series A, $5 million for this company. Now we have a 2-year runway. We are going for FDA approval next year. It will be commercially available. This is world's first liquid helium-free 1.5 Tesla MRI machine, which is lightweight, so I can put it on a truck, take it to a primary health center, do an MRI scan there, send it to a centralized repository, have a team of radiologists doing the interpretation. This is possible. Now, there are 6,000 old MRI machines of GE, Philips, and Siemens in the United States itself, where the annual maintenance cost is more than the capital expenditure on this MRI machine.
Wonderful.
This is what happens when you innovate for Bharat.
Yes.
You suddenly unlock global market. However, nobody writes you a check. Government writes checks, but it's suboptimal. You will get 5 lakh, 10 lakh, DST, BIRAC, DBT here and there. That's not going to. You have to just scavenge everything, comb it, get whatever you can, friends, family, R&D, CSIR, DST, DBT. So by the time you are near success, not yet success, you will have 500 people taking credit for your work. Oh, we did this, we incubated this, we did. Give them credit. Give them, tell them, you did it, all your credit.
Yes,
but give me my 5 lakhs, give me my 10 lakhs, right? And build your company. You have to learn to build your company on internal cash accruals, prize money, and grant, because nobody is willing to do what they are doing with Swiggy, Zomato, and Flipkart, and 10-minute delivery. That money is not for you. So these are the 2 success stories. Can I call them success? We are, it's been Vauxhall great, MRI machine 6 years with us, and 5 years of R&D before that. 11 years of dedication of a founder. Full 3 years of R&D, 6 years with us. Now both are in Series A, but when you hear about impact investment and all that, forget about this. This is not the playbook. VC playbook, no, this is not the VC playbook. That's why we built Social Alpha. We need a new playbook for Bharat. You need a new playbook for Bharat. A capital that is very patient, long-term, willing to stay invested very long, and willing to take suboptimal return or willing to write off.
Right.
Willing to write off. Right? That capital is required.
In some manner, you're going back to the basics. Building a business in Bharat is going back to first principle basis, right? You're learning the business the hard way. You're trying to understand the problems, the real problems that exist, not from a Bangalore conference room, but on the ground, right?
Not from internet search.
And not a spreadsheet scaling model that a VC will give you.
No.
Right?
No. It's not about large TAM, growth market, 100%. That all is later.
Right.
Right now, it's about what is that problem that you are trying to solve, who is going to pay you for this, is there a customer, and what is the evidence of that customer. You may have a solution that you think is a solution, but if the poor, marginalized, vulnerable population in a remote district in Uttar Pradesh where we are working with BioPrime, and those people are not willing to assign any value to your innovation, sorry.
Yeah. So think through of your questions that you want to ask Manoj. I will come back in a few minutes, not at the end, but somewhere in the middle, to get a sense of what are the developmental challenges or the issues that you are facing, and then let's see how can Manoj help. But Manoj, I want to try and dissect the success story into actionable takeaways that the audience who are wanting to get into Bharat can work on. What are those 3-4 things that you would suggest?
One, most important, what is the problem?
Understanding the actual problem.
Don't solve your problem. A lot of times we see people build the product and then try to search market for that. That doesn't work here.
Right.
Identify the problem, build a thesis around that. Okay, how big is the problem? Who is paying? If the consumer is not the customer, like primary health care, where state government is the customer, but patient is the consumer or doctor is the consumer. Identify where is the cash, how you are going to capture that cash. And that cash may be very small, so you have to demonstrate value. What is the value? Value is in solution. So your ability to understand problem and identify the triggers and those tools that demonstrate value. Are you increasing income of small and marginal farmers? Are you reducing their cost? Are you making them more productive? Are you reducing drudgery? Are you helping reduce and manage their risk? What is that you are doing? And how you are different, right? Don't go to a farmer with an assumption that you will build an app and they will download and check the weather on your app, because you will realize when you go to the villages that in a household maybe nobody has a smartphone, or maybe there is one smartphone that the driver husband keeps for his entertainment, while the wife who works in the field still has a feature phone. So you understand the social dynamics also, that in a society where you have gender disparity, it also reflects in access to smartphone versus access to the feature phone. So your app is not going to actually help anyone. Or you may actually build a solution for healthcare without realizing that none of the dispensaries are on grid. So the problem is actually not healthcare, it's access to electricity. And in Northeast India, most of our primary health interventions initially failed because we were trying to put technology there, and the problem was access to grid, because grid failed. So we had to roll back and we started solarizing these dispensaries with Selco Foundation so that we can then give them access to healthcare.
And so how do you really discover problems without having empathy? So to some extent, you spend time on the ground, right?
Yeah,
There's no other way of doing it.
Not in Bangalore, Delhi. Yeah.
Right. What
You
is
cannot.
it?
Because in Bangalore, the problem is traffic. The problem of small and marginal farmers, you have to go to those aspirational districts and live there. The problem of drinking water or water resources or water table going down or soil degeneration, this is not a Bangalore problem. Bangalore is a first world problem, right? 10-minute delivery. That's Bangalore.
I'm not so sure it's the first world at this point in time. At this point, but let's come back to
10-minute delivery is getting funded.
Okay, let's come back to understanding the problem. That's your first takeaway. Second, what else would you advise?
So once you have the empathy and you can understand and relate to the problem, you have to also understand that your old way of services and digitizing services are not going to help here, because we have already optimized that. All the impact investors, all the microfinance companies, all the Fab Indias and all the craft people and all dairy value chain, they have already done it. So there is hardly any scope for services now. So what you have to do is now, instead of saying that I will provide you clean drinking water, you have to go with a shrink wrap box that provides clean drinking water to community.
Just a product focus.
You have to switch over from services to product, because products will give you non-linear growth. Products you build once and sell many times, and your long-term sustenance and your own value creation will only come from product. In services, you will get disrupted every day. Somebody will provide better service than you. Create the IP. The moment you create the IP, like the MRI or BioLeather or BioPrime or any of our companies, once you have the IP, it's the global market for you, right? So you take time to create wealth, but eventually you will create wealth if you solve the problems. Whether it's problem of water, soil, food, nutrition, healthcare. At the end of it, every state in India is like a country in Africa, right? So you have a global market, and nobody is innovating for poor. Everybody is innovating for iPhone, right? But who is innovating for? And it takes 30 years for a mobile phone to reach to a coastal community, right?
So empathy and product.
Empathy,
Product. Third, money. How do you raise money?
So that's another thing. You are giving your 10, 15, 20 years to a cause. You have to start with the assumption that you are working to solve the problem. Because you don't have to deliver any return to any VCs, because you won't get money from any investors. So you have to assume that your mission is to solve the problem. In order to solve the problem, you will raise money from wherever it is available. So find early customers. Sometimes revenue is the money. Learn to grow on internal cash accruals. Learn to grow on non-dilutive capital. Eventually, some investors will relate to it. See, people are also waiting for de-risking, right? We end up blaming venture capital. Let us not do that, because venture capital, people invest other people money. It's a 10 years, close-ended fund. They have raised money on a promise. They have to deliver returns to their LPs. So that playbook will not work here. So which playbook will work? So I'll give you an example from impact investing. In the last 3 years, 70% of the impact investment has gone on Series C and O. Only 5% is available for seed, and that 5% is for digital. So if you are doing soil micronutrients, that money is not for you. So you have to find now, is there a government grant? Is there a subsidy? So what we do in Social Alpha, we focus on market access. Because we have to make sure that our startups get access to revenue early. Because revenue is also the evidence that people are willing to use your product and pay for it, right? So if you work on the demand side, say you are working with small and marginal farmers are willing to pay for your product. That will only happen when their income goes up, or their cost goes down, or their risk management capability improves, right? Now you take the startups to these communities, right, and create this whole matching between demand and supply side. You have to create that win-win value proposition where both are incentivized. Farmers for using technology, and startups for selling to the farmers instead of roaming around and trying to find the market. That takes time, and that's tough. That's field work, right?
You also spoke about corporates. You spoke about the previous example, you spoke about corporates came in and helped.
Eventually,
is that
eventually they will.
co-creating with a company, co-creating with a partner?
See, sometimes. Okay. For example, if you are working in decarbonization of steel and cement industry, you have to have corporate partnership, because there is nobody other than Adani that controls cement in India, or Tata and Vedanta and some of these companies, right? Aluminium, copper, steel. Now all these industries are causing emission, and if they have to decarbonize and get into green manufacturing, they need solution. And corporates' internal R&D is not as efficient as the startups, right? So we work in clean energy transition, for example. So we have a partnership with Tata Power, we have a partnership with Reliance, and these partnerships help, because what their R&D cannot do, our startups can do. In that case, some of the startups may actually be the part of their supply chain. Right? But you remember, disruption will only come from startups. The US automobile industry was not disrupted by General Motors and Ford. It was disrupted by a software engineer called Elon Musk. So steel, cement, mobility, healthcare, even agriculture. I will not be surprised that one day we have our own Steve Jobs, or our own Elon Musk, or our own Intel, or our own Apple that disrupts. But till then, you will have to make sure that you are converging with corporations.
Let's take a sense of the audience, and let's see if there's any questions from the audience in terms of questions that they want to ask you. Anybody? Yeah, go ahead. Can you give him a mic, please?
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Manoj. Very nice, interesting insights. This is Kumar, founder of Not On Map, a social initiative. My question is, you talked about the demand part, right? And many times the product which is coming from the rural parts, is slightly expensive in terms of typically talking about the cost part of it. And realizing that the purpose-driven market size in India is slightly small. What's your take on that? That is the sentiment changing in the mindset? Because when they have to shell off the money, they talk about, is it worthy? And that becomes a, kind of a double-edged sword.
Good, thanks. Let's see if there's another question as well. You can take it together. Any other question? There's a hand there. Yes, please.
Hi, this is Ashish. We work with Indic languages and scripts. The question is, building teams then becomes a challenge because you don't have access to normal capital. So it's a long-term game. I've always found that hard to get like-minded people. Do you have any suggestions on how do we go about building that?
Good.
Thanks.
So cost and teams. Go ahead. Go ahead. Mike.
Challenges. No, great questions. I'll first answer yours. See, any community, whether they're rich or poor or marginalized, right? Any community will accept a solution only if it's affordable. They can pay for it. They have access to it. And one thing that gets really neglected most of the time is they get the right user experience, right? A lot of time when we innovate for poor or rural communities, we say, let it be cheap, they will buy it, right? Because it's cheap. See, we forget that people have aspiration. Everybody has aspiration. People want to upgrade in life, right? So in our product design workshops, we tell our people, don't neglect user experience, right? While you are trying to reduce the price, focus on that also. When you build world-class products for every price point, Toyota, for example, right, has a car for every price point. Maruti has a car, but it doesn't mean that the quality of the lower end model is compromised, right? You still maintain the quality at that level. We see this whole problem of price sensitivity in all sectors. Assistive technology, disability space where we work. Usually, these are early stage startups, so their bill of material is very high, so they cannot meet the price point at which market exists. So what you have to do is to create market. Sometimes you have to create subsidies. You have to, like in agriculture, we work with the state government and see what kind of subsidies are available. You have to shamelessly use every subsidy that is available in the system. You will, there are subsidies, there are market access. So for example, we work with SIDBI and State Bank of India. We have created a market access fund for assistive technology. So for few, years for the sales to pick up, we keep subsidizing that. You have to do that. We raise philanthropic capital to take our agriculture startups to the villages and try to fund their pilots, right? A lot of work needs to be done in demonstrating value. The moment the value is demonstrated, price becomes secondary, right? If I'm going to make 10,000 rupees extra because of your input, I'm happy to give you 1,000 rupees out of that, right? But until and unless that value is demonstrated, you can't. While in the consumer market, people buy on advertisement, right? You can say that, my shampoo is better than your shampoo, or, this cigarette is better than that. So that doesn't work here, because here people want to see evidence. So you have to do pilots, go to the villages, show them how does it work. Doctors, they're not going to use your device just because you say that this device is great. So you have to demonstrate to clinicians in low resource setting that by using this device, they can improve the health outcomes, right? This demonstration of value is most important thing. Price then becomes secondary. For human resources, in this space, you will only get people who are driven by mission. So finding the right co-founder. First few people should be your co-founders and not necessarily the employees. Because, you are not competing with well-funded Series C companies, either on stock option or on bonuses, right? So that's not your HR competition. So your HR competition is to find people who are mission driven, build that core team, and then, slowly add more people. But yeah, till you have raised your Series B or C, you really can't think about hiring at that scale.
You have also always spoken about the fact that you need to combine impact with profits, right? It's never profits alone. In Bharat, you need to provide the societal impact, so therefore the passion angle is important, not just from the founder, but also from...
I would say if you prioritize impact,
profit
will eventually happen. Because you are solving a problem that nobody has solved. And you are solving that problem at a scale. If you prioritize profit and say, okay, I will focus on profit, but I'll also create impact, you will make trade-offs. Sometimes easy money, sometimes VC, sometimes your investor pressure, or sometimes the willingness to take services contract to survive, right? So you have to make sure that you are focusing on impact. Eventually, if you are solving the problem, money comes, right? Because that is the primary hypothesis of working in this space, that I'm going to solve the problem of soil degeneration, or I'm going to solve the problem of water resource management, right? And I'm going to solve the problem of access to primary health care in low resource setting. Or I'm going to solve the problem of greenhouse gas emission or carbon capture and sequestration. These problems, when you solve, the market is large. It's just that, like when internet started, nobody knew now market would be so large. Microfinance used to be NGO activity. Nobody used to do. But once people realized that it's 10% return on asset and 95% repayment behavior of rural women, now microfinance is more mainstream than banking. Microfinance companies' valuation on national stock exchange is better than ICICI and SDFC Bank. Why? People have seen. So you have, see, somebody created value. Professor Yunus got a Nobel Prize for building that model. But now you see, now all impact investors or mainstream investors, they invest in microfinance.
Sure.
It's as mainstream as SDFC or ICICI, right? So what I'm trying to say, creating new market should be your focus. Then you create impact, and when you create new market, the evidence would come in the business, eventually. So you need long-term perseverance, resilience, and ability to remain in the sector, right? The mortality is very high.
Which
It
comes from
takes a lot of
passion.
time.
Which comes from passion.
Which comes from. Don't do it for romance, do it for passion.
Manoj, we have a few minutes left. If they have to work with you, how does the social alpha model work? Would you invest in a regular, as a seed fund, as an investor, or is there a different approach?
We provide grants, we provide product development grants, we provide access to our own laboratories, we provide access to our partner laboratories, we provide access to scientists, engineers, consultant, investment bankers. We also provide seed capital. We also raise money. In the next round, we have an investment bank built within Social Alpha. So it's again, it's an ecosystem stack. So we have our own incubators, we have our own accelerators, we have our own venture fund. So what we have tried to do is to create a multi-stage model so that throughout the life cycle of the innovation, from TRL1 to TRL9, at every stage you have access to blended capital, you have access to whatever you need. And it's competitive, of course, and it's milestone based. So it's not, we also have opportunity cost of capital that we consume. So it's very competitive. Sometimes we fail, sometimes we are successful. But yeah.
But it's an ecosystem that you have
It's
created.
full stack, right?
For-
So if you are in Social Alpha ecosystem, you have not been able to raise money, and Social Alpha model believes that you can really create the impact, it will invest. And never put any pressure on you for exit or return or anything. There is no predetermined exit or IR.
Wonderful, Manoj. So let me try and summarize the 4 points that I'm taking away, right? And I'm hopefully the audience as well. The first, as you said, is focus on the product, not services. Focus on IP, build capability for the long term. That is something that will give you a non-linear return. Second is build empathy, understand what it is to be a farmer, a teacher, a shopkeeper in Bharat, etc. You can't do it from Bangalore, so build the deep understanding. Third, prioritize on impact and not profits. Build markets, then impact, and then profits.
If you build market, profit will come.
Right. And fourth is look for alternate sources of sustenance. Don't go to a VC. Don't assume that you will get anything from a VC. Look for other sources. Could
And if
be,
you get, you are lucky,
Yeah.
great, take it, right? If you get VC money,
Yeah,
take it.
yeah.
But don't start with an assumption that you will do a pitch as per,
Right,
those
right.
how to raise money tutorials on YouTube.
Right.
That doesn't work.
Right.
Right. Yeah. It's not pitch presentation and someone writes you to Airbnb type check. It doesn't happen here.
Manoj, thank you so much.